You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, it's me again, Steve Adams or Mighty Blue, and you are listening once more to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. I'm back from California after what I can only describe right now as a transcendent experience in the truest sense of that word. I'm not going to talk about it much, if at all, today, because I'm putting together one or maybe even two shows about the hike for the next couple of weeks. What I will say, for those of you who don't know, is that at last, I was able to get my picture taken at the very top of Mount Whitney. Look out for that story in the next couple of shows. Today's show is a little shorter than usual, partly because I'm bloody exhausted after that trip. But we have a returning friend of the show, Clay Bonnyman-Evans, who has done so much hiking since we spoke with him on one of our earliest podcasts that I thought I'd bring him back to update us on his latest adventures. And with the Mighty Blue class of 2022 now whittled down to just one remaining member, we catch up again with Dan Whitesides and his dog Frankie. As always, Dan is talking meals, not miles, although a 30-mile day tends to dispute that as well. Finally, we have another long chapter from Then the Hail Came as George Stephanos leaves Damascus behind. Again, this is being cut into sections, as to read an entire chapter would take me well over an hour and about 4 hours to edit. So let's start by meeting an old friend of the show, my buddy Clay Bonnyman-Evans, or Pony. Well, our guest today is one of the oldest friends of the show. I think he was very early on the show. This is Clay Bonnyman-Evans. Hey, Clay, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. And I thought I'd call you up to see if you'd come on the show again, because you haven't stood still since you hiked the AT in 2016. So run through the various trails you've done. Actually, I'm not sure you got notes in front of you, but I have got the notes in front of me. So I'll tell you what you've done. Before you went on the AT in 2016, you did the Colorado Trail in 2015. And I must say, when you talked about that, it's always made me want to do it. But as you know, I worry about the elevation, but we'll come to that later possibly. Then in 2017, you focused on hiking the 14,000 foot peaks in Colorado. Then you did in 2018 the Foothills Trail and the Pinhoti Trail. Then 2019, 300 plus miles on the Great Plains Trail. 2020, you carried on with the 14,000ers, or 14,000ers. Just you've apparently got one left to go now. Which one's that, by the way?
Snowmass.
Snowmass.
Out by Aspen.
And you went back to the big ones in 2021. You did the PCT. And in 2022, you've done the first 1,000 miles of the CDT. Now, you've hiked all these trails now. Which one stands out as one you may like to have a go at again?
Well, so I refer to myself as sort of a serial monogamist when it comes to trails, because I tend to be very in love with the one that I'm doing at the moment. And so, for example, in 2021, I was all PCT all the time and just cross-eyed in love. Love the PCT. This year, I started working on the CDT, which I have done quite a bit of previously just for various reasons. But, you know, I knew I wasn't going to finish. But so honestly, that's the one that's got my focus right now. I really, really loved the miles I did on the CDT. And I can't wait to get back next year. I do hope to finish next year.
I bet you can't. Can you... and you're a writer, and we're going to talk about your writing later, but can you articulate the differences between the three main trails, the parts of the Triple Crown? Because I know I've not done the others, so I've got no knowledge of this, but from what I understand from people, they're so different.
They are different. So let's do AT PCT first. I mean, we could go very deep on this, but let me give you the top surface layer. The AT is without question, physically much harder than the PCT. Now, that doesn't mean the PCT isn't hard, because it is, but it's just the AT is steep and the terrain and the tread is much harder. So you sort of take that piece and say, okay, the AT is harder. But the PCT is logistically way different from the AT. It's just much, much more difficult. And really, I kind of have two examples of this. One would, well, you could find this all along the AT, but the bottom line is nowhere on the PCT are you going to be standing at the bottom of, on a trail, quote unquote, looking up an incredibly steep hill that just looks like a bunch of boulders. And you kind of run into that pretty often on the AT. That's not unusual, right? It's
alarmingly often.
Yeah, exactly. So that's sort of like the piece that I pull out and say, that's your AT experience in that regard. And then for me on the PCT, that logistic thing is sort of crystallized by Kearsarge Pass. So you've gone into the Sierra. I don't remember how many 100 miles you've come in. You've left Kennedy Meadows south. And most people need to resupply about that time. In order for you to get food, you've got to hike like 2,500 feet up and out. And it's, 12 miles or something, and down. And then you've got to hitchhike, and it's like 15 miles of really steep road. And then you get to a little town, and, you might stay there, or you might go either way to Bishop or Lone Pine. It's just it's an enormous effort just to resupply at Kearsarge Pass. So to me, that kind of represents like, yeah, you're going to be working a lot harder to get those logistical things done. And it's much more expensive too, just for rides and things like that.
Yeah. And what about the PCT? So, you've done 1,000 miles, so I'm sure you've got an impression of the PCT in a big way. How about that? Logistically, is that even worse or even tougher rather than the PCT?
So you meant CDT. Yeah, you're referring to the CDT. Yeah,
absolutely right. Yes.
So I'll tell you what. So what I did was I did all of New Mexico this spring, and I was very fortunate. I happened to just time it well so that I got to just past the New Mexico-Colorado border, 3 miles on is Cumbres Pass. I got there the day before the Forest Service closed most of the national forest that the trails go through because of fires. So I was very lucky. And then I just went back and I did a couple 100 miles more in Colorado. And honestly, I didn't find the logistics very difficult at all.
Oh, really?
Especially in New Mexico. They're just regularly spaced towns. You're actually going through them. You're walking right through the middle of Cuba, for example. You do have to do a long road walk, but it's part of the trail into Grant. So it was really pretty easy. Now you do get some long food carries down in the South San Juans, which are very steep, and you're basically up at 12,000 feet the entire time you're up there. But I didn't find it any harder than the PCT. And in a weird way, well, I'm going to just say they're about the same from what I've done.
And what about water? Because obviously on the AT, well, in a wet enough year on the AT, it's okay to get water. What about the PCT and the CDT? As I understand it, there's a lot of caches and things like that. You have to work out all those things, and you're drinking from cattle, whatever they call them, the ones where the cattle feed. Is that really as bad as that? Because I know Dixie was feeding out the cattle troughs.
Yeah, the PCT, you do go through about 700 miles of a desert environment. And I will say on both trails, hikers are extremely lucky to have people caching water. Because if you didn't do that, you would definitely have some much more arduous water carries. I never had anything on the PCT where I was like, oh, this water is disgusting or gross. There's some little cisterns, or people will find a dead rat or something. I have no problem. Now, in New Mexico, on the CDT, you are very much in the desert for most of the time. And yeah, I took water from stock tanks. That's what we call them, with the cattle water. But, if you're willing to just, throw pounds and pounds of water on your back, you don't have to do it. So there were, I would say, so the first 85 miles through the Chihuahuan Desert is really quite insane. I don't know why it's so hard, but it's just flat and hot. And basically, when you pay for your shuttle to the border, there's two outfits that do it. You get access to massive water caches, and thank goodness, it's about 85 miles through the desert. So you don't have to worry too much there. And then there was another area a little further up north where there's a family that caches water. And even then I didn't bring quite enough just because it was hot. But again, I didn't find it crazy. I really didn't.
So talk about the desert. You didn't get any of that in the AT, obviously. Was that a bit of a shock to the system, or was that because a lot of people I've heard of say they really enjoy the desert? So did you?
Yeah,
it sounds incredibly unattractive to me.
Well, I'll tell you, everybody's different, and I've always known I sort of like desert environments, but I'm a desert rat. It actually may be where I am almost at my best when I'm out hiking. I do really well in the desert. I like it. Hell, if you're not worried about rain, I cowboy camped almost every single night on the CDT when I was in the desert. I like that because I'm lazy. I'm a desert rat. I really like it. I hiked with a kid, a young guy named Trainwreck, really nice guy. He thought New Mexico was extraordinarily boring because you've got these long, flat, horizonless kind of landscapes. I don't know why. I think it's cool. You're seeing snakes and lizards and, canyon walls and stuff. I thought it was spectacular. So, but I get it. Not everybody loves the desert. I think I'm a desert rat.
And what's the community like in those two particular trails? I mean, because obviously we all know about the community on the AT. It is incredibly popular, and to me, it's one of the richest parts of being on the trail. So what's the community like out there, out west?
I'm just going to tell you it's the same. It really is such a huge part of the experience.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that from everybody, so I'm really pleased that that's the case.
Yeah, the PCT is like, there's obviously tons of people, and it's like I always say, we're a bunch of people who are choosing to do a hard thing. We're all pulling in the same direction. We've got stories to tell. There's that sort of instant camaraderie. Absolutely love it. I went into the CDT thinking, well, this one's going to be different. It's different in the density of people that you're going to see, but honestly, it felt pretty much the same. I mean, I hiked and camped alone most of the time, but I'm walking past people or whatever, and we get to know each other a little over a couple of days, maybe see each other in town. To me, the community is very much equivalent, just not quite as dense. AT, it's like everywhere. Sure. Yeah, PCT, everywhere. It's nearly everywhere. CDT, it's a little more sparse, but it's really kind of the same spirit.
The spirit is the important thing.
I agree.
And they're those two trails. So talk about the other trails quickly, the Foothills Trail and the Pinhoti Trail. And obviously we've spoke to you about the Colorado Trail in the past, so we won't do that. And then what part of the Great Plains Trail did you do?
Yeah. So Foothills and Pinhoti are two trails in the South that I ended up doing in 2018 because I was doing a book tour. So I was busy. And while I was in that area, I just decided to do them. Here's what I'll say about Foothills. If you're a person who thinks you might want to try through hiking or might especially want to do the AT, go do the 77-mile Foothills Trail in South Carolina. It's like a tiny version of the Southern AT. You get everything. Really? You're along the river where they filmed part of the movie Deliverance. Yeah. Beautiful. You'll get a sense of what it's like. You do climb the
By the way, this is a complete segue. I once saw Eric Clapton on stage in the Royal Albert Hall in London, and he called on another guitarist to do dueling guitars as opposed to dueling banjo. He called on Mark Knopfler.
Mark Knopfler's the best.
And the two of them did this for 20 odd minutes, and it was a knockdown contest. They were both exhausted at the end of it. It was fantastic.
Two great guitarists. I'm a huge Knopfler fan. Right. So Foothills, seriously, folks, if you think you want to try this, try that one. Pinoti's a little, they're really pushing it. In case you haven't heard, there are some people who are pushing to make the beginning of the Pinhoti Trail on Flag Mountain the beginning of the AT, and there's this.
We've had an episode about that, a couple of episodes about that as well. Interesting.
Yeah, it's a controversy, but it's not as developed. I found more water troubles on the Pinhoti Trail in the fall than I did probably almost anywhere else except the Great Plains Trail. But it's neat, and if you want, you can do those 330 miles, get on the Mackay, and then jump on the AT and keep going north. Like
Nimblewall did last year.
That's right.
Which is pretty cool.
He's very opposed, by the way.
I know he is, yes. And what about the Great Plains Trail?
So I've been fortunate to just be kind of part of this effort started by Steve Myers. It's really his baby. He loves the Great Plains, and he's really mapped out. It's more of a route, but more and more we're getting it on public lands and so forth. It's a trail that goes from the Guadalupe Mountains in Texas all the way to the North Dakota-Manitoba border. You can't really through hike the whole thing unsupported. You would need some help in New Mexico and possibly part of Colorado. But we designated what we call the pilot trail a couple of years ago through the Black Hills of South Dakota and the Panhandle of Nebraska. And that's what I did. Wow, what an experience. It's just so different. Now,
in what way?
Well, I never saw any backpackers. Like nobody, literally nobody. Now, the first part of it is on the Centennial Trail through the Black Hills. This is another highly recommended trail for people who think they want to maybe do a Western trail. It gets up to 7,000 feet, not too high, about 125 miles long, plenty of water. You'll see buffalo, you'll see antelope. I mean, you'll see Mount Rushmore if you take a little bit of an alternate. It's just fantastic. So, and then from there, once I got sort of off that trail, I was on rails to trails and dirt roads into what I call now the Great Nebraska Savannah. It is the Ogallala National Grasslands. And I mean, water, I had Steve stash me water because it was 98 degrees in the end of August, early September. Gosh. And if you love big open country, it's not flat. I mean, you go up over Pine Ridge, which is an escarpment. And again, you'll see all kinds of critters. Really, really different experience. There were 3 days I was with a radio reporter who wanted to do a story on the trail. But other than that, I saw nobody. So if you're into the solitude, hit me up. I can point you to the GreatPlainsTrail.org and, you know.
And what's the mileage expected to be once it's done?
Well, there's one person who's done the whole thing, but the route sort of changed. But so Luke Strider Jordan is also on our board. Luke has done the whole thing. And I think the route he took, it wound up being about 2,200 miles, something like that. It's pretty straight.
So it's a proper walk.
Yeah. Oh, it is. And it's pretty straight. Yeah.
Right. And you talked about the differences in trail. What about and you just mentioned buffalo and antelope. What about the differences in flora? Well, more actually fauna. What sort of animals did you see on these different trails?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to say with foothills, you know, you are basically on the equivalent of the Southern AT. You're going to see the same snakes. You might see a bear. You're going to see some deer. You're going to see a lot of the same things you would see in Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia. Peyote, same thing. Great Plains Trail, like I say, I think the big boon there is once you get into Custer State Park, if you don't see a buffalo, you're either blind or have terrible luck. There's a lot of buffalo there. And I tell you, I camped this place one night and I just heard what sounded like a demon or an ogre. And I was up on this little kind of hill behind a rock and I was like, oh my God, what the hell is it? I got out of my tent and I peeked over. There was an enormous buffalo bison bull down there sort of snorting and pawing at the dirt. And I thought, man, you really wouldn't necessarily want to like walk face to face into him. The next morning I get up, it's like 7 o'clock, top over the hill, turn the corner, and there's a giant bull right in the middle of the trail. But they're lazy, they're cattle basically. So I had to cut way up the hill. It's quite the experience.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I think seeing any animals live, not in a zoo, is just extraordinary anyway.
Yeah.
And I was talking really more about the PCT and the CDT then. So what animals you see out there?
Well, let's see. Nothing. I saw bears on the PCT. I saw deer.
What sort of bear?
Black bears.
All right.
And there's rumors that there's grizzly sightings, but you know what? I don't think that's established. There are, however, interestingly, there is a pack of wolves that lives up around Lassen National Park. I don't know many hikers who've seen a wolf, but you could. So we saw mountain goats up in Oregon, which is really Washington, I guess it was, in Goat Rocks. That's my favorite part of the whole PCT. Tons of desert fauna. Some people see giant tortoises, which I did not, but some people do.
Cool.
You're going to see snakes, lizards, all that stuff. CDT, kind of same deal. You might see bighorns. I did not. I saw antelope at 11,000 feet in New Mexico. And I was like, wait a minute. I had no idea they lived up this high. So it's very Western. very desert, and you can see you might see a bobcat, you might see a mountain lion. Obviously rare. I didn't see any big predators on the CDT yet.
Now, you said also, I'm not going to talk, we don't want to talk, well, I don't want to talk about that much, which is the peak bagging.
Yeah.
How different emotionally is bagging a peak to a long distance hike?
Gosh, what's the difference between a sprint and a marathon? I would say that's the difference. Because the way I do peaks is I'm pretty quick up, pretty quick down. I'm often the first person up. I get up early, just like I do on trail, but I'm trying to do these things. I mean, I love the experience, but it's hard. I mean, you're cranking, your lungs are, they're working hard to get up above.
I just don't see the attraction. I never have done.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just my belief that a through hike, and it's only a through hike that would work for me, not a partial, section hike doesn't work for me personally.
I agree.
I want to go from beginning to end.
Me
but
too.
I can't see going up top of a bloody hill and down again just for the fun of it. That never works for me at all. I just wondered how you feel about the difference in those things.
I feel very accomplished when I do these things, especially as I got to the, there's really 54. Newcomers to Colorado like to pretend there's 58, but there's rules. There's 54 14ers in Colorado. That's the truth. And the thing is, I didn't really intend to do this, but throughout my life, I'd done so many. I got about halfway through and I thought, well, I might as well do it. And I had left all the difficult ones till later. I will be honest with you, those are way more satisfying to me. So pretty much all the ones I've done in recent years have been the hardest ones, and the harder they are, the more accomplished I feel. So, yeah.
And you're not a kid, are you? You're in your 50s?
I just turned 60 last year. I'll be 61.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, in
wow,
November.
good for you, man.
Yep.
And you're still pony. You're still the first one up. One keeps walking all day long.
I kind of often am, yeah. Usually hiking with people half my age.
And now, I know also you're married, and so you're looking at this list of accomplishments. There doesn't appear to be a lot of time you've actually been at home. So what does your wife Jodie think about you traipsing off and walking miles on end?
Well, for starters, let me say that we both have had the attitude for years and years that we love each other. We want each other to enjoy our lives. So she does things that I'm not that interested in, and This is one of my things. My ask of her is pretty darned extreme. And I will say that she's incredibly supportive. She dehydrates food for me. That's her choice. I didn't ask her. But I will also say, last year on the PCT, I was away too long. The trail itself was only 4 months, but there was a month on either end when I was helping my mom in Colorado. And it wasn't good for our marriage. I'll just leave it at that. And so we've really talked about it. And, this is one reason why, like you, I prefer a through to a section hike. We thought I thought I would try to section the CDT, and technically I'm going to section it. But you know what? It really isn't the same for me. I'm like you. I like that. I'm going to start here and I'm going to go here. So we're working it out. She's very giving and kind to me. And I think she has brought up and said, look, you can just go finish the CDT next year if you want. So it's not easy. It hasn't been easy, and honestly, she's put up with a lot from me.
It's pretty cool to have that support. And people on the show know I love the fact that people get support, because I would think this must be the toughest thing in the world to do, to be away for 4 to 6 months and somebody bitching in your ear the whole time, man or woman. Some people just don't like it. Yeah. And in terms of your hiking ambitions, you've done a lot of the good trails, and there's lots of other trails around, I know. Do you have wider ambitions? Do you ever want to hike abroad?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's sort of getting weird. Like, let's hope, fingers crossed, I finish the CDT next year. And by the way, I've just adored the CDT. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it, but I have loved it. Yeah, I want to do the Camino. I think that would be really exciting. I would like to hike in Scotland again.
Do that with Jodie. I promise you, going with somebody you love, you can eat well, you can drink well, you can have a great time.
If there were one out there that she would do, it might be that one. And I agree, that would be the one. I want to hike in Scotland because I love Scotland. I was there years ago. The one single night that another person camped near me on this last bit on the CDT was a German woman, and we were talking about Iceland. And Iceland sounds really cool to me.
Dix is out. Well, she's either out there now or she's just come back.
Oh, yeah.
She's doing some big trek in Iceland. Yeah.
It sounds pretty cool to me. So yes. And honestly, it's going to be interesting to not like have some big, monstrous trail waiting out there on the horizon for me. I mean, I could go do the Te Araroa or something like that. But I think what you're talking about is maybe going to be more my alley, like picking out smaller things where I just really want to go be in the place.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I agree. I've got an 8-day hike coming up. In fact, I'm leaving now. By the time this airs, it will be the first week after I've got back, hopefully. But I'm going on. This is August the 22nd. We're speaking, but I'm going away on Thursday to hike in the Sierras. Up and over, trying to get to Whitney for the 4th attempt.
Oh, nice.
I don't want to talk too much about that. I don't want to put the kibosh on it. Now, you're a writer, and so tell us about your newest hiking book. And I want to know why this is. It's called Adrift on the Pacific Crest Trail. Why Adrift?
Yeah. Well, you heard me refer to a little bit of the sort of separation that Jody, my lovely wife, and I had. Sure. And that's what the Adrift refers to. I mean, I like that word. I think it's an interesting word when paired with this idea of sort of floating up high in the clouds. But really, it was anything but adrift in terms of the hike itself. I started at the border and I just mowed right on through. There were a few little fire closures and this and that, but you know what? It was exactly what I wanted. Everything went perfectly, almost perfectly, literally. So the thing that didn't go perfectly was trying to remain connected to my wife. And we both realized, we should have had a plan. We didn't know that. So the adrift was more like being adrift away from, floating too far away from the rest of my life, which is so important to me. So it does refer to that. And look, I
kind of guessed it did actually.
Yeah.
You and I haven't talked about this at all. We had no pre-interview conversation.
Nope.
Which I normally do, but I think I know you well enough. And I saw that title. I thought, I wonder if that's what it's about.
Yeah. And it's fine. We've worked incredibly hard to make sure that we get it all back together and it doesn't happen again. And it's actually an interesting lesson that I've talked about a little bit publicly, which is just to say, if you're a person and you have a partner at home and you're going to do one of these long trails, if it were me, I would come up with a plan for that. How are you going to stay connected? That is just as important as where you're going to resupply, what gear you're going to take. I think it's incredibly important and something that I think people don't really think about.
That's one, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute. One of the things we're going to talk about at the Woods Hole weekend, by the way.
Yeah.
But because I think it is important, but I'll mention that in a minute. Now, I'm going to ask you what I call my Betty questions, and for all sorts of reasons, you may not know why that is, but there's 5 quick questions. What did you love, or do you love most about hiking? What is it that gets you going as a hiker?
It's really about the connection to the people in the end.
Okay. And these are quick answers, these ones. And what do you dislike about it?
How obsessive it makes me.
No shit, Sherlock. Like it. And looking back, what would you do differently on your hike? And let's just go with one. Say this is about the AT, this show generally. So talk about your AT hike. What would you have done differently? Because it was your first big one, wasn't it? You did the Colorado before, but.
Yeah. Wow. What would I have done differently on the AT? Because I love my hike. It was so odd and patchwork, but I guess in an ideal world, I would have done it super traditionally, start at the beginning and just go all the way to finish.
Sure. And what did you wish you knew before you started? Is there something you acquired along the way about what to do, how to hike, that you wish you'd known before would have made it easier for you?
This is going to sound a little glib, but I think just everything changes all the time. No matter how bad or how good you feel, it's going to be fine. You're going to be fine. You just know you're going to be fine. Everything's going to work out. So that sense of just having that in your back pocket, and I did pretty well, but I can endure absolutely anything. And all these trails have just toughened me up mentally. So I don't know if that feels like an answer to you.
No, you know what? It's your answer, and that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, you've always been honest with me, so I love that part of it as well. And over the years, what has been your best gear choice? And please don't tell me it's that stupid orange bandana on your head right now.
I'll tell you what my favorite piece of gear is for the last 3 years. It's going to sound silly to people. It's my BioLite 200 USB rechargeable headlamp. That thing weighs, I don't know, 2 ounces or something. It's got 200 lumens. It never doesn't work. It's so reliable. It's like, you know, they say you can curse the darkness or light a candle. I know that I've got light when I've got that BioLite in my kit. And I know that sounds strange, but honestly, I think it's my single favorite piece of gear.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Good to know. Yeah. Good to know. And do you actually night hike?
Yeah, sometimes. But you know, it's just there in my tent. And when I hear the snuffling, grunting out there, I can just, you know, flip it out. I just love that thing. I really, really love it.
That's cool. Now, you and I, we did talk about some time ago putting together a history of the AT podcast a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I know you do some work with Zach at the Trek. Mm-hmm. Is there anything you may still explore going forward, either with Zach or with me, whichever you prefer, obviously?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I don't know what's become of it, but I do know that Chance was sort of working on a thing. I don't know what's become of that, but yeah, that was a good idea. I mean, there's all these ideas. It's sort of funny now. Mighty Blue, you've been out there for so long. You know, you've got hundreds and hundreds of podcasts and you've got the track record. And that, by now, all these years later, it's sort of like it's a cliche, like, oh, everybody's got a podcast, you know. So I would be so late to the game, but I love this world. I love the richness of the stories around the trails. So that is of interest to me for sure.
Well, you know what? The best time to start a podcast was 2006, or 2007, something like that, when it all started. Second best time is right now.
Yeah. You
so
think?
Just think, oh, absolutely. Yeah. You know, I think there's so much out there. And one thing I've learned, and this is going to sound, it was told to me one time, people come to your podcast because of the content initially, but they stay for you.
I agree.
They stay for the host. So I think and let's face it, you're not a shrinking violet.
Yeah.
You know, you're happy to express yourself. That's why I think you'd be a good podcaster, which is why I asked you to think about it in the first place. And it's not that difficult to work out how to do as well.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's always there on my mind. I for sure it is. And, you know, all different kinds of things. So I appreciate the reminder because I think I would enjoy it and I think I might be good at it. I mean, you are the character that brings people back. I know that. I've said that to you for years. And, you know, there are non-hiking podcasts I listen to that I actually think about it like, wow, these guys are talking about baloney today, but I don't care. I like the way they interact. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Now, a last question. It's more about, you're going to be, as I mentioned earlier on, joining us presenting again at the Woods Hole weekend in October. So first up, thank you for that. What are you hoping that people, because you've been on one before like I have, what are you hoping people take away from that experience?
You know, I think based on the last time we did this, which was so much fun there in that COVID year, it was really interesting.
Yeah.
I loved the fact that between those of us who were presenting, you know, and Neville, who was hosting, we got every single one of those people who came really excited. And you could see it, you could hear it, you could feel it. And a whole lot of them have gone out there and done some amazing things. So I would honestly say, I would be super happy if we can collectively get everybody going again, get them excited to do what they want to do to the point that at least some of them are going to really go out and do this. And they don't have to, but I was so proud and so excited to see that people went out and really tackled some big stuff.
They definitely did. Yeah. And you're right. You could see, I mean, I was kind of nervous about it when we first started, but you suddenly realize, I know this stuff. I know what I'm talking about. And people, you could see in people's faces, they were getting something from it. So, you know, I'm looking forward to, I can see you now, obviously on the screen, but looking forward to seeing you in person in October. And, just keep climbing mountains, man. So it's been lovely to speak to you again. Stay in touch, and I'll see you in October anyway, okay?
Excellent. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on again. I since I hiked the CT, since I did my first one, I've through hiked or long distance hiked, whatever you want to call it, about 6,700 miles. So it's been nice to kind of be able to pop into Mighty Blue here and there and update everybody. I love it to death, and I love you, and I love the show, and it's been a huge part of my inspiration all along.
That's very nice to say. Okay, man. We'll take it easy.
Great.
And I'll see you in October, the beginning of October.
All right. See you soon. Bye.
Cheers then. Bye. Do you know what? Clay is such an easy bloke to chat with an enthusiasm for the trail that knows no bounds, as you could tell. I normally have a pre-recording chat, but in Clay's case, I knew that we could talk about stuff without any real agenda, and as ever, he delivered. As I've been away for a couple of weeks, we have a few more people to thank today. We've had recurring donations from Justin Mullins, Kevin Eastman, Ann Dobson, Mike DiCello, Terry Hackler, Jens Lipperheider, Brian Helton Jr., Woody Bass, Lisa Rana and Natisha Webb. Also this past couple of weeks, John Park and William Smith donated. William did so specifically for our new Hammock Hangers podcast, so I hope that you're all checking out all the other podcasts on the Hiking Radio Network website, as we're trying to bring you different aspects of hiking by the inclusion of new shows that we think will enhance your knowledge and enjoyment of hiking. The people I mentioned previously have recognised the value that we bring to you, our listeners. None of us are in this to make a fortune, or indeed hardly any money at all. Yet, if you find that we're bringing value to you, please consider a donation through our website. It is very simple to do. Just click on one of the many donate buttons, and it demonstrates to us that you want these shows to continue. Cheers. Now let's catch up with Dan Whitesides, or Trumpet. Dan has become a real ray of light in the past month or so with his enthusiasm. But when we last spoke, he'd been diagnosed with the dreaded Lyme disease. Let's pick up with him now and see where he is. Here's Dan.
Howdy.
Hey, Dan. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing pretty great. How are you doing?
You're always doing pretty great, aren't you? I'm doing pretty great as well. I've just come back from hiking in California, and I got up Whitney for my fourth attempt of trying to get up Whitney. I actually got up it this time, so I'm really pleased about it.
You got up it? That's awesome. That's so cool.
It really was great. It really was great. So how are you? You know, because I mean, I've been away, and even though our conversation from 2 weeks ago was in last week's show, quite a lot has happened since to you. So let's catch up. Last time you told us that you'd contracted Lyme disease. How are you feeling with it now?
I'm doing pretty well, surprisingly. So I definitely still have it. I still feel sleepy all the time, and I still have some aches, but I will say probably 3 days after we talked, I took a Nero at Mosey's Place, this great hostel in New Jersey. And next morning I got dropped off at 8:30 in the morning, and I felt really good. And Frankie and I, Lyme disease be damned, did our biggest day. We did 30.1 miles.
Oh my God. So the tiredness isn't stopping you actually hiking properly.
No, I mean, I still I get sleepy, and maybe once a week I'll have some instant coffee to really get my guns going. But you know, I've made it this far. I feel like my body is in the best shape it's ever been in. And being this close to the end, I really have the motivation to I wanted one day to bust it out, run as hard as I could. So between 8:30 a.m. and 8 p.m., we ran 30 miles. I carried Frankie's backpack for about half the day, but he was an absolute champ.
Was he? Bless him. Good Lord. And I know you're taking a zero right now in Duncannon going south. So from my memory, I seem to think when I was going northbound, the rocks really started soon after Duncannon, just after Duncannon. How did you and Frankie get on with those rocks? Because you're pretty much over with those now, I presume.
Yeah, pretty much done with them, thankfully. I mean, they weren't that bad. It was just annoying. Frankie had no problem. I mean, he always has 4 points of connection, so maneuvering around a rock is really not a problem for him. It's more just, for me, having your feet slamming down on these sharp, annoying rocks.
Yes.
My legs aren't tired. At the end of the 30-mile day, my legs weren't tired. My heart wasn't that tired, but my feet hurt for the next 2 days.
Of course they do. Oh dear, I remember that well. There's virtually no place when there aren't rocks to be standing on. You put your feet down, and there are these sharp things under your feet, aren't they? And they wear you out. They definitely wear you out.
They're truly terrible, and the water situation has been pretty awful.
It stayed hot. Is it?
It's not too hot, but the Pennsylvania game wardens destroy water caches, so that's
really?
Not super great.
Really?
Yeah, I ran into one, and they actually told me essentially, well, people could tamper with them or poison the water, and then we have to come rescue the hikers. And I didn't say anything, but I wanted to say, well, if you're really worried about rescuing hikers, you should be worried about people getting heat stroke and needing to be rescued rather than somebody poisoning a water cache.
Good Lord.
Yeah, that really bothered me.
Yeah, that's a bit odd. And who are the people who are actually doing that?
So it's the Pennsylvania game wardens and I believe the Forest Service. They actively destroy water caches. I had heard about it, and I ran into the game warden and I asked him, I said, I'm genuinely curious, why do you do this? And he gave me that answer, and I kind of thought it was a bit of a cop-out nonsense answer.
Wow. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
But in your note to me, because I asked you for a few notes to catch up before we did this, you let me know that you're also now with a bunch of Sobos. What's the size of your group now then?
Yeah, well, I mean, not really with the group, but the mileage seems to work out. I met these 3 really cool Sobos probably maybe 5 or 6 days ago. Cheerio, Twigs, and Purple Haze.
Right.
Purple Haze actually did the Colorado Trail last year, same time as I did.
Nice.
But yeah, the Sobo bubble, and apparently I'm at the church hostel in Duncan, and apparently there's 11 other Sobos that are going to be coming in today.
Wow.
That I haven't seen since Maine. But the Sobos are so nice. I met a lot of really wonderful Nobos, and also met a lot of not so wonderful Nobos I could maybe do without. But pretty much every Sobo I've met has been super nice and happy and just enjoying the trail, and really wonderful to hike with them.
Do you know what, Dan? You're not the first person to say that. I seem to remember, I can't remember who it was, but I remember somebody else saying that. He found that the positive attitude of the Sobos was in distinct contrast with the somewhat negative attitude of 1 or 2 of the Nobos he met. What do you think it is? Why do you think that is?
So I ask them all the time, too. I'm always so curious. Everybody, it's either a lot of international people that just this is when they get their time, or a lot of
Sure.
very young people,
Right.
Because this is when they finish college or something. But I think a lot of it is starting in Maine. So you start with such a gorgeous, beautiful, wonderful section, whereas a lot of the Nobos I met, all my Nobo friends are finally in Maine in the Whites, and they're like, I'm tired. This is brutal. I want to be done. Whereas they start with this gorgeous, beautiful scenery, and then they get through the Whites and everything. They get through this challenging part, and then it's essentially smooth sailing from there on out. It's much, much easier, a much kind of chiller hike, and you're not fighting for tent spaces. You're not fighting for a bunk in a hostel area. I don't know. They're always just very, very happy to just be on trail. And I'm telling them all things about the South, and they're all just very excited about it and happy to be there.
That's nice.
It's been really cool.
And are you actually enjoying the company then? Because you've had quite a lot of time alone. Well, you and Frankie, obviously, but you've had kind of a lot of time hiking alone, haven't you?
I pretty much am always hiking alone, but it is definitely nice to have people at camp. And, I love doing trail magic, so getting to make pancakes for them coming out of Port Clinton.
Oh, tell us about that. Tell us about that, because you said you'd be making trail magic. What did you do?
This one was, I woke up early in Port Clinton. I packed out a bunch of veggies, some pancake mix, some chocolate chips. Did 18 miles, landed at got to camp at 3. The Heartline campsite. Took the rope swing into the water, and then started cooking up some big old chocolate chip pancakes for people.
Oh, I
and
remember
then
that
my
place.
3 buddies came in and made some pancakes, and then sauteed some asparagus, peppers, and broccoli that we all ate with some fresh greens I packed out. When you get trail magic, it's such an amazing experience, and then when you get to give it back, you just feel wonderful. You feel like a ray of sunshine is in your heart.
You're one of the few who's actually hiking the trail I've met who actually does the trail magic as well. But yeah, I know you enjoy it. You're into the, as we said, the mills not miles category. And
exactly.
How far have you got to go now then? How many more miles do you have to do?
So with the extra 100 miles I'm doing to meet my parents in Shenandoah, I am 215 miles away from being done.
Wow. And how are you ready to be done now?
I'm not gonna lie, I'm ready to be done. I've been out here 5 months and I'm enjoying it. It's a great time. Definitely the rocks in Pennsylvania have been a bummer because you can't look up from your feet, and if you do, you stub your toe.
Yes, every time.
But I feel like everybody comes to the trail with something they want to think about, over the course of the trail, like, about this new job, about this girlfriend, about something. And, for me, it was starting to live out of my car after this and getting dog number 2. And I've kind of gotten all those plans. Now I have the kind of adjustments I want to make for the car. I have dog number 2 kind of already picked out waiting for me. So there's things that I want to do once I'm done. Not that I'm not enjoying the hiking, but there's things back home that I am excited to start.
That's nice.
A new adventure,
But how do you mean live out of your? Is it literally a car or is it a van?
It's like a compact SUV. I'm just gonna get like a roof rack and one of those big skybox things to put on top. And if living out of my backpack for 5 months has taught me anything, living out of a car is gonna be freaking easy in comparison.
You'll have all that space, but you're gonna have two.
Have all the space.
Hang on, you're gonna have 2 dogs in the car as well.
Gosh darn right. Very excited about it. Dog number 2 will be much smaller, though. Not like a Chihuahua.
Thank God for that.
Like 40 pounds.
Oh, my God.
And Frankie's 65. So definitely be able to fit a little bit better.
And now you are near the end. So you've done virtually 2,000 miles, probably over 2,000 miles. How is your gear actually holding up so far?
It's kind of not. Well, I'm on my 5th pair of shoes, which is kind of shredded now, but I think I'm just going to wear them into the ground. My tent zipper is a little bit messed up. I'm going to have to buy new trekking poles because the cork grip on my trekking poles has been falling off every couple 100 miles, and I've been gluing it back on. I've been losing tent stakes or bending tent stakes. Things are definitely on their last legs, but I will say my headphones broke the other day. So I ordered a new pair to the Boiling Springs, but whatever survives. Oh, I'm on my 3rd sleeping pad. The other one popped outside of Warwick.
Yeah.
But whatever survives this hike, I'm just going to declare it like you did your job. I'm proud of you. You can rest now.
Yeah, damn right. You put your gear through a whole lot of stress and strain over this period. So the fact that you've got near the end and I know you always have to change stuff out, but that's life in general. You have to make changes as time goes on, don't you?
Yeah, there's through hiking is the most brutal thing you can put a piece of gear through.
Oh, and definitely.
Whatever has lasted, I will say Frankie's backpack is probably the hardiest piece of gear I have. That thing is indestructible. I am blown away.
And when do you think you actually will be done then? What's the date? Have you got a date in mind?
So I actually do. I've had it for a little while because to do this thing with my parents, we booked these cabins in advance in Shenandoah. So my parents are just going to hike from cabin to cabin and I'll tent outside. So September 23rd is when I'm meeting them, and I'll be back home in Georgia, done with the trail, September 26th.
Right. Well, we're going to follow you right through to the end now. So we'll just stay in touch. Let me know when we can speak next week. And I'm actually going to be putting together 2 shows for my my other, my hike I did in California. Mm-hmm. But I'd like to include a conversation with you in the middle of those as well. Okay.
For sure.
Okay, man. Well, good talk to you. Stay safe and keep look after your gear.
Thank you. I'll try my best.
Okay, man. Appreciate it. Cheers, then.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
He's such an up guy, isn't he? But as you heard, he's ready to be over. I think there comes a time in most through hikes when you just want to be done. You want to stay in the moment and enjoy the whole experience, but sometimes it becomes a little bit overwhelming and you're ready to get to the end. I think Dan's there now. Still happy though, isn't he? Now, don't forget about the Woods Hole weekend coming up in early October. If you've ever wanted to hike the AT as a through hiker or a section hiker, come along to meet me, Jester, today's guest Clay, and our newest podcaster and 2012 AT through hiker Paul Skunkape Collins. We put together a program on everything you could possibly want to know about hiking the trail, and we're having it filmed, so you'll have a permanent record to refer back to as you make your preparations to hit the trail. There are still 5 or 6 places to be filled, so reach out to Neville at Woods Hole. You can reach her at woodsholehostel@gmail.com to book your place. We hope to see you there. Now, beginning of chapter 7 of Then the Hail Came. It's another long one, but in this part of the chapter, we see George set out from Damascus, settling into his own solitude on the trail. But there's also a puppy. I'll see you next week. Chapter 7. Then the Hail Came. Damascus, Virginia to Petersburg, Virginia. Wednesday, the 8th of June, 1983. Mile 453.2. I had a reasonably good sleep on a mattress in the hostel, although the hellish snoring of one of my roommates detracted somewhat from the charm of the experience. The walls rattled all night, plaster fell from the ceiling, and an amorous bull elephant showed up looking for some slap and tickle. Boy, was he pissed. The next town I hit with a hotel or motel, I'm going to get a room all to myself for some peace and quiet and guilt-free marathon showers. Not that I have any complaints about Damascus or the hostel. The people of that town really know how to make hikers feel welcome. A friendly mutual respect has developed between them and us over the years. Business owners are helpful and courteous, even beyond the bounds of fabled small-town southern hospitality. Their church trusts the hikers and bicyclists staying in the hostel to behave themselves. They do not have a caretaker in residence. Payment for the stay is by donation, with $1.50 being the suggested amount. I left more. My 2 showers each probably consume more than $1.50 worth of hot water. After awakening respectably early for a trail town morning, about 7 o'clock, I spent the next couple of hours loading my backpack and filling my package for home with items I had decided were unnecessary, such as a lightweight button shirt I've carried since Georgia and never worn. I hike in my t-shirt. If it's chilly, I wear a chamois. If you do not use an item, get rid of it. Almost reluctantly, I also gave up my wool sweater, which takes up a lot of pack room and is fairly heavy. It will become more of a very occasional inconvenience than a necessity in Virginia. I'll be needing it again in northern New England, if I make it that far. It was a typically cluttered trail town morning. I carried the package over to the post office and mailed it, stopping at the hardware store for fuel and the drugstore for a large can of antifungal foot powder. I figured my feet were owed a treat, payback for all the abuse that they have endured. I also picked up a birthday card for my grandmother. I wanted to replace the 2 useless lumps of sodden lint which I've been using for inner soles ever since the Great Smoky's deluge, but the drugstore carried them only up to size 11. My feet are size 13. I had been trying to replace them ever since Hot Springs, with the same results each time. A cobbler's shop on my way back to the hostel did have insoles in my size. Oh no, I'm getting happy feet. I dropped off my purchases back at the hostel, strolled over to the Dairy King to partake in another gargantuan lunch, and visited by the post office one final time to mail the card. Returning to the hostel, I took a steaming hot shower using a bar of soap I'd bought last night just for the occasion, and shampoo another hiker had left behind. When I emerged an hour later, I left what remained of the soap for those who follow. It was the least I could have done because I sure did not leave them any hot water. Remember, I've said that I'm becoming sort of a nice guy. I never said I have actually become one. I left the hostel at 3 p.m, just as a new batch of backpackers was rolling in. On my way through town, I stopped at the grocery store and picked up some frosted Pop-Tarts, which I had almost tragically forgotten. Being a real man, I might have managed to suck it up and deal with life on the Appalachian Trail without them. Fortunately, I will not have to. Leaving Damascus was a rather depressing experience. Its small luxuries and good people were a great tonic for one slightly used backpacker. I dulled the pain by stopping at the Dairy King one last time and picking up a large chocolate ice cream cone, something with which to occupy myself as I trod the lonely road out of town. My pack weighed a ton, as it always does fresh out of a supply town with a full load of food and fuel. Other than that, hiking was not unpleasant. The path was excellently graded and maintained. Mountain laurel along the trail was just beginning to bloom. Although my heart was not in the effort, I managed to grind out 7 miles before coming upon a lovely sight in the gorge of White Top Laurel Creek, which I simply could not pass by. I accomplished my 2 modest objectives today, dragging myself away from Damascus and placing myself well within range of the next shelter, now about 20 miles away. I pitched my tent in a quiet little pine grove alongside the gravel bank of the creek and lay back beside the rushing waters. Damascus slowly faded to a pleasant memory, and the Appalachian Trail again became my sole reality. All in all, this is not a bad way to live, and Perrysburg, Virginia is only 155-80 miles away. Thursday, the 9th of June, 1983, mile 472.8. Perhaps the most interesting hike to date of the entire adventure began this morning at 7:45, a decently early start for the night owl of the thru-hiker set. The Appalachian Trail climbed away from White Top Laurel Creek, wandered the long wooded crest of Straits Mountain for a bit, and returned to the valley. The Ridgewalk detour seemed rather pointless, as the gorge had been much more scenic, but it did provide 2 memorable incidents. As I approached the ridgeline, 2 large white-tailed deer crashed out of the woods less than 100 feet in front of me. On the way down, I was viciously assaulted by a crazed mother grouse. I was strolling along, minding my own business, when a loud hiss abruptly broke the forest calm. Startled, I looked up to see an angry mass of puffed-up feathers charging down the trail towards me. After a moment of confusion, I identified my assailant, laughed, and kept walking. She then changed her tactics, employing an old ruse. She ran off into the woods, whimpering and holding her wing as if broken to lure the suspected predator into chasing an apparent easy meal while drawing him away from her children. When I continued to ignore her, she hissed once more with terrible fury and charged me from behind. I was relieved to leave that nest behind before the poor girl suffered a stroke. Apparently, she had built her nest directly adjacent to the trail, and the strain of constant intrusions was making her crazy. I don't mind saying that her initial surprise attack was a bit of a strain for me also. I hope she makes it through the summer without losing her mind. She was one feisty little lady. Back in the gorge, the Appalachian Trail joined an old railroad grade known as the Virginia Creeper and followed the creek through masses of flowering rhododendron. I'd heard rumours in Damascus that the 80 is going to be relocated off Straits Mountain in order to follow the creeper for a greater length. I have to say that this would be a definite scenic improvement. The mountain was okay, but the gorge was a little jewel. The thru-hike is, for the most part, a peaceful experience, but the calm can at any time dissolve into moments of dire peril. Shortly after crossing Virginia Highway 859 and beginning an ascent of a ridge named Lost Mountain, I stopped to rest in the gentle murmur of a lonesome forest grove beside a small brook. I was removing my pack, blissfully unaware of the imminence of my own mortality, when suddenly a nearby strand of rhododendron began to rattle and shake as if torn by some violent tempest. That got my attention. I spun around to meet my fate head-on, brandishing my backpack as a weapon. My worst fears were realised when there erupted from the bushes the black, hairy form of the most dreaded and dangerous predator in the southern Appalachians, the little black puppy. Okay, go ahead and laugh at me, but this is bear country, and in that one instant, as that unidentified black shape burst forth from those bushes in that secluded thicket, my body's adrenaline production skyrocketed. My assailant had medium-length, jet-black fur with patches of white on his paws, muzzle and belly, pointed ears, large, ungainly puppy feet and legs, and a face with which a lonely backpacker could easily fall in love. When I sat down, he walked over and pressed himself firmly against my leg, demanding to be petted. Against my better judgment, I did. He rolled over on his back to have his chest scratched. Inevitably, he followed when I left. I did not look back once and walked for a long time without stopping, hoping he would give up and go home. Nevertheless, he was all over me a few miles later when I finally had to sit down. When I set out again, he continued to pursue me doggedly, even though his tender young paws appeared to be getting sore. We walked a few more miles without passing any water, so I stopped at the stream we crossed just before US Route 58 in order to ensure he would stop and get a good drink. The trail descended 5 wooden steps to a footbridge, crossed the stream, and ascended 5 more steps to the top of the opposite bank. I sat down on one of the bottom steps, and he soon grasped the concept. He walked underneath and took a long drink. When he had finished, I gave the poor little guy one of my precious granola bars and nearly a couple of my fingertips. He was ravenous. He even ate a deer fly right out of the air. His uncoordinated puppy antics kept me laughing, Small fish were swimming past under the water, and he began jumping from the steps down to the stream and back up again, obviously fascinated by the fish. No doubt he was also wondering how they would taste. For some reason, on his last trip from the stream to the steps, he tried ineffectually to grab himself back up rather than to jump. He slid off helplessly into the water while I roared with laughter. He dragged himself out, shook off several gallons of water, slunk over to where I was sitting, and jammed his body beneath my legs for protection from the cold, wet world. He remained in that position for several minutes while recovering from his trauma. Even as I laughed, I was becoming more and more concerned with what I was to do with the little fellow. I had absolutely nothing in my pack with which to feed a dog, and the next trail town was days away. No way could I care for him and still keep my dream of Katahdin alive, yet I was responsible for him now. He had made me his mother. We had been together for a few hours when the Appalachian Trail passed through a farmyard and climbed a stile over a wire fence. As I was perched up top, a door opened and 2 large dogs came bounding out of the farmhouse in a frenzy of barking. They were all over my new friend in a second, but I could tell by their wagging tails it was merely play. When a lady's voice called out from the doorway, the dogs moved back a little and gave me enough room to come down without stepping on them. I walked around to the front of the house. I asked the nice lady at the door if she knew anyone in the area who had lost a puppy. She told me people were always abandoning puppies in these woods, and that her own 2 dogs were trail strays. She also told me that all captured strays in that area were arbitrarily shot, just as in North Carolina. As we talked, I began to realise I had stumbled across an extremely rare commodity in these parts, a dog nut like myself. I told her the stories of our first meeting and of those fishes in that footbridge. We had a nice talk, becoming almost friends in a very brief time, thanks to our shared interest in animals. I told her that I was already starting to love him, but I could not keep him, and asked if she could possibly find him a good home. Although worried about springing another trail stray on her exasperated but understanding husband, she agreed. She even turned down the $20 I offered from my dwindling finances to help her feed and care for him while looking for a home. She went into the house and came back with a leash and a collar, which she placed on his neck while he playfully tried to nip her fingers. My backpack was lying flat on the ground a short distance away where I'd left it. When I walked over to pick it up, he climbed on top and started rolling around on his back, chewing on the leash. The lady laughed and told me that it looked like he wasn't going to let me leave him. I smiled. I eased him off my pack and lifted it onto my shoulders. The Appalachian Trail crossed Virginia Highway 601, a narrow rural road, and went through an open field for a short distance before disappearing into the trees. I said goodbye to my 2 new friends and turned away, crossing the road and the field without looking back. I hiked for a long time before stopping to rest. The trail soon began a long climb up White Top, the second tallest mountain in Virginia. Extensive meadows covered the crest near the summit. I trod open grasslands beneath a hazy, whitewashed sky and felt my flagging spirits revive a little. It was a great place for me to be at that moment. The gap between White Top Mountain and Mount Rogers was home to another large meadow, filled with more bluets than I had seen in one place since southern North Carolina. I had the first rattlesnake encounter of my hike while walking down into that gap from White Top. Ordinarily, that would be an exciting event for an Appalachian Trail hiker, but on this eventful day, it barely left an imprint on my memory. I almost forgot to write it down. I was about 6 feet away before I noticed him. When he saw me, he took off like a bat out of hell. I made a bigger impression on him than he on me. I'm staying tonight in deep cap shelter on a forested slope of Virginia's highest peak, Mount Rogers. I had the place all to myself, which gives me plenty of time to miss friends both old and new. I've grown accustomed to being alone since Dave and I parted in Hot Springs. In fact, I've enjoyed many aspects of that solitude. However, the taste of companionship and affection I enjoyed for a few hours today has left me feeling somewhat empty inside now that it has been removed. I'm 935 ATE miles from Connecticut as I lay here tonight in southwestern Virginia.